Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to PCCS's emPower Hour. My name is Alyssa D'Agusto.
My name is Kevin Roman.
And happy DSP week to all of you DSPs out there. Thank you for all that you do each and every day, especially this week. We just wanted to make sure you get a little shout out from us. And thank you again for all that you do. I hope you all are staying tuned for our daily raffle drawings. So that's been a lot of fun. We want to thank you all who participated in the raffle. And thank you to our sponsors. Before we have our guests come on, I do want to take a moment and thank our sponsors who had helped us make DSP Week possible. So we want to thank Therapy Connection for their sponsorship, to our food for our group homes. So thank you, Therapy Connection. And we want to thank the Staten Island Giving Circle, who have donated funds to help us get Dunkin' Donuts gift cards to our traditional DSPs. So thank you to the Staten Island Giving Circle as well.
Thanks, guys. Couldn't have done it without you. And, definite shout out to all the DSPs, former DSP here. It's a great, wonderful job. And I think that nobody could stress the importance of your job enough. Can't say thank you enough, honestly. And definitely keep up with our raffles, because we may not be able to say thank you enough, but we could give you some stuff too. So that's cool. So check us out.
Absolutely. Thanks, Kev. So now, with that said, we want to move to our special guest today. Today we have with us Lyric, the Neurodivergent Rebel. So Lyric, thank you for joining us today.
Thank you so much for having me.
We're really happy to have you. So for those who are watching, we want to get started and kind of introduce who you are and how we got to know you.
Yes.
So if you could give us a little bit about yourself.
Yeah. So for people who have never met me or seen me before, I'm a short, thin, pale, mixed descent person with short green hair and shaved sides. And I am a late discovered autistic adult. I am 34 now, but I didn't know I was autistic until I was 29. So I went through a large part of my life thinking I was a broken neurotypical and not having the language to explain and describe why I struggled with things such as education, relationships with other people, the workplace, things like that. I always knew I was struggling and not meeting expectations, but I didn't really know why. And I internalized a lot of that, was really hard on myself for a lot of years until I found out I was autistic. And it was just this aha moment when I found this neurodiversity focused mindset of people whose brains work differently and empowering those of us who come at the world from a different perspective instead of blaming us for our inability to fit into the systems that have been set up by neurotypical society. And by neurotypical, I mean people who don't have ADHD, OCD, dyslexia, dyspraxia. There's a few others, and a lot of them actually are really common with autistic people. If you're autistic, it's very likely you have something else going on as well. Like I have an ADHD diagnosis. A lot of autistic people, an overlap that's really common also is OCD, but dyslexia, Tourette's, all of the different divergencies we see in neurodiversity tend to be more common in autistic people. So a lot of us aren't just autistic, we're autistic plus. And so I'm autistic plus several other things in addition to being autistic. And I, not having that language for so long really is hard on a lot of us. And so I started kind of screaming into the internet 5 years ago when I found out I was autistic, to try and, I guess, help other people like me that were struggling and didn't know why. Because when you're in that place, it's hard on your self-esteem, really hard on your self-esteem. And having the information was kind of a thing that just took a big weight off of me and allowed me to develop self-compassion for the first time in my life. And that's a really, really long intro, but you're going to realize that as an autistic person, I kind of tend to it all out there, and that's what I do. So we're going to be in for more of that today, probably. So thank you.
I love that. There's just like so much to even just that intro. I'm like, wow, there's so many like questions that I have.
I'm like,
so
it's
much
going
that we
so
can talk
long.
about. No, that's wonderful. I love it. I mean, can we start, I guess, with like what that journey was like, learning about being diagnosed? Like, what even set you to think maybe, maybe I have a diagnosis?
Oh, yeah. Well, I had been going to a general health practitioner because I was in a job that I thought was my dream job. I really wanted this corporate job, but we physically moved to a new space, and some of the demands changed, and they wanted me physically present in the office more. And so they also had like a change from like sitting in a quiet little office with natural light to fluorescent lighting. And I started to get really sick. I started to have migraines. Like every day I was in the office, within like the 4th or 5th hour, I was getting a migraine. Anytime I was there, I started to lose weight and not be able to hold food down and keep food down. I felt really anxious all the time, as if my adrenaline was just constantly pumping nonstop. And I also started to have seizures, and I've had seizures off and on throughout my life. And all this is serious because I know once, if they get bad, like when you have one, you start to have more, and you have more and more and more. And so I knew when I was like in middle school, the last time I had problems with the seizures, like, and they had gone away for a few years, like it was completely debilitating. I wasn't going to be able to go to school, back then. It's like, I'm not gonna be able to hold a job. I'm not gonna be able to do anything. It was really a scary realization. It was like, if I don't get this under control, I know where I'm headed. So I was desperately like working with my GP, trying to find some answer. And we didn't really find an answer back then because there were so many other things going on. And really, I still didn't have the language to explain what was going on with me, because I didn't understand autism, and I didn't understand sensory processing differences. And I didn't understand that the migraines and the fluorescent lighting and all of that was a really important piece. And so the doctor couldn't sort anything out from that. We were doing diets, all kinds of things, looking at my digestive system, and none of it really gave any answers. And the doctor didn't think to look at neurological. Right. And then eventually the doctor's out of answers and goes, I don't think there's anything physically wrong with you. I can't find anything physically wrong with you. I think it's, maybe you could go get a mental health assessment, maybe it's anxiety. And at that point, I had also, because for a lot of years, like, as autistic people, we did have really intense interests. And one of mine was dog training and animal behavior. And I had a dog training business at that time too, on the side. I do too many things at once. That's another story altogether. But I was studying animal behavior and dog training, and I stumbled across another book that was written by an autistic person who was into animal behavior. And then they were also describing their experience of the world in the book. And I was like, well, that's exactly how I think. That's exactly my experience of the world. And I was like, that's really weird. And, I thought about it for a little bit. There was like a book online that says, so you think you might be autistic. It's kind of like a little quiz book, and you read it and you're like, check, check, check. So it's kind of like to say, if you think you might want to go ask about a diagnosis. And I'd kind of put it to the side, and I was like, no, I don't think so. Because I've been trying to like disprove this thing to myself in my head. It's like I went through all the stages of grief with this diagnosis, from, denial and anger and all of it. But so since I had been referred to mental health assessment, which, at that time I was like, mental health, there's nothing wrong with my brain. I'm fine. I was very not aware of mental health the way I am now. And I really didn't want to go. And I was like, well, if I got to go, can I see someone who knows autism? And the doctor referred me, and it's like, I don't think you're autistic, but here's like some, gave me a card and got a referral. And then I went through the process, and I found out I was autistic, which was like, oh, yay, woo. Right. But it was just like kind of because I asked that question, since I had stumbled across another autistic's voice talking about something that wasn't necessarily an autism related topic, but they were like talking about how their autistic experience influences that thing they love, and it was just like, I was lucky enough to stumble across one autistic voice. So I asked the question, and so I found out. And so that was kind of my aha. It's like, okay, but these autistic voices are kind of hard to find, or they were. It is easier now, but it's still not great. About 5 years ago, it was really hard to find autistic voices, especially on the internet. So, almost right away when I realized, like, I just needed to know this. I wish I could have just known this was a thing, so many years ago. It would, I didn't want anybody else like not knowing and just lost. Like, I don't know. So I was like, I need to help people find autistic voices, was kind of why I got into it.
Oh, wow. All right. I definitely, I'm kind of at a loss for words, even in a way that I think that it's so important that there's, that level of conversation, like you're saying, and like expressing this out loud. If anybody happens to follow them on Instagram, which is where I personally had known you from, a lot of it is not necessarily your almost clinical viewpoint of what people would think an autistic person. Like there's, you do it's not stilts, is it still, you're not on stilts, there's like,
no, not stilts.
there's I'm trying to remember exactly, but like, you talk about like regular life,
Oh yeah.
and then from this framework that people can look at it and kind of ask like, oh wow, that you talk about when you, previous to your diagnosis, that you didn't know what like stimming was, and like sensory experiences, and how much you like sensory experiences and things like that. And somebody who, like you said, may just identify, hey, you know what, now that you mention it, yeah, I always like to do something, like that. I think that's like so important. And so how has like been the response since you've been doing your advocacy work essentially?
I couldn't have imagined the response I would have got 5 years ago when I started. Like I started this little blog, but really, it mostly blew up because I was kind of engaging with other autistic people on Twitter. I started a hashtag called Asking Autistics because there was a great need for non-autistic people to understand autistic people. But the hashtags we currently had were actually autistic, which is not for non-autistic people to use. It's specifically for autistic people to find each other, which wasn't helpful in that instance. And so like that's kind of where it like started with Twitter, and the Twitter blew up before anything else. The Twitter like really blew up really quick. And it was like, oh my gosh, how did this happen? Like before I knew it, I woke up and I had 7,000 followers, and I was like, really not expecting anything like that, especially not that quickly. I see, and I still don't think of myself as famous at all. And it's, I think now the reach is actually, I don't even know what it is now. I haven't checked in a while, but like the Facebook page is over 80,000, I think, which just blows my mind. And it reaches like 1 million people a month, sometimes 3 million a month. It's like 1 to 3 million a month is how much that page reaches, even though they aren't all locked in there.
Right.
And like I'm still like I'm not like people like, you're kind of famous. I'm like, no, I'm really not. I'm just an autistic person in RV. It's humbling. It's really humbling. It blows my mind every day. I'm really grateful for the opportunity. I think what really happened is, that I don't want to say to hurt anyone's feelings with this, but like, that saying, let your freak flag fly. I'm a proud freak, and I'm letting that flag fly. And oh my goodness, all my other wonderful humans, I'm not going to call the other people freaks. I'll call myself a freak, but I'm not going to call anyone else that. They've found me. My people have found me. My humans have found me, which is funny because I thought I was just like this weird anomaly for a lot of years that a lot of people couldn't relate to. And all I started to do is sharing the stuff in my head that I thought nobody would understand for many years. And now it's like, it's the stuff resonates the most with people. It's kind of weird to me. It blows my mind.
It's really finding your tribe, really, and having your tribe find you in a way, So like, what are some of like the most common like misconceptions that people have about disability, do you feel, especially for adults? I feel like, there's a lot of misunderstandings, and I think that people have like a very like certain view a lot of times of what a disability would be. Like, what do you think are some of the common misconceptions that people really need to be aware of?
Well, I think what a big problem is people forget that some disabilities aren't visible and you can't see them. Like I haven't had a seizure now in over 2 years, knock on wood. Hope it stays that way. Yeah, really awesome since about early August. But I'm still epileptic. If I neglect my self-care, have too much caffeine, start drinking a bunch of alcohol, not get enough sleep, and have more stress in my life, and go sit under fluorescent light all day, the seizures are going to come back. The migraines will come back. Just because I am thriving right now, because I have all of these supports in place, that doesn't mean I am no longer someone who has a disability. I'm autistic, and that does always impact my experience with the neurotypical world. And a lot of that, though, is because society and its systems haven't been set up to take my needs into account. Like public spaces are not sensory friendly. The grocery store, something a lot of people go like, oh my gosh,
I can't
the
do
worst.
The grocery store.
No, yeah. My partner got me these AirPods like last year or something and they have that noise canceling, and they have been life-changing. I wear them a lot with just silence with sound canceling, sometimes with music, but even just having that noise canceling on has been like life-changing.
Nice.
Or like I'll wear sunglasses inside if I'm feeling too tired to deal with the fluorescent lights that are in Walmart and HB. Like every big store has these big fluorescent lights, you know, in public spaces. And I can handle it short term, but it does make me feel like I'm getting too much energy in my, like, oh, I need to get away from here. Like eventually, like, I don't know, like especially on the holiday season when it's really hard, like I get to the point where I'm like, I need to run out of here right now. I'm sorry, I can't. You know, it's too much. But at least I know why now. I know where it's coming from.
True. I really appreciate that a lot of the language that you're using really is like it resonates with just everybody. You know, we all have certain things that trigger us or certain things that stimulate us and everything like that, or whatever the case may be. And I really like that because I feel like it bridges a gap. I feel like a lot of times people who aren't familiar with any sort of disability of any kind, they kind of feel like a certain otherism that's somebody with ADHD. Whatever the case may be. I feel like it really bridges a gap to realize that, you know, for us in the agency, we always feel like people should be just in the same society as everyone else. Like you said, the society doesn't support you always as well as you need sometimes, you know? And the more that we can bridge that gap to realize, like, you know, and just keep each other in mind that we all have similar stressors in life, that we should be more mindful of those that maybe can't handle it as well as some other people, you know? How important do you feel like language is when we're talking about these things, especially as a person who, you were saying your hashtag was actually
the one I started was asking autistics. Actually, autistic was around before I knew I was autistic. I don't want to take credit for that. That's not mine. But that one is one of the first ones I found that helped me find other autistic people, because that was one of the only ways I could find them 5 years ago. Was actually autistic. Like asking autistics, yeah, I think it's really important to center autistic voices in this. The other thing that's important to realize is individual people are going to have different opinions, you know. So my opinion, there are going to be autistic people that disagree with me. There are some things that tend to generally be like if you do surveys, you'll say majority feel this one way, but the minority that feels the other way has very strong reasons for feeling the other way. And so I don't want to dismiss anybody's feelings. If you know, just moving forward. So I just want to say that not everybody's going to agree with what I'm about to say. But in general, when you talk to autistic people themselves, especially online, the language preference tend to be autistic over person with autism. And that is, you know, for a lot of us, and for me, like I will speak for myself here, I don't see autism as something that could be like removed. Like, is this my autism? I'm going to take it off and put it here. And now I'm no longer autistic. Because being autistic is just so ingrained in who I am as a person. Because, you know, autism, you think about even the diagnostic criteria, it impacts how we socialize. It impacts how we communicate. It impacts our interests and our intensity and our focus. There is trying to be more studies that kind of see the overlaps between being LGBTQIA and gender nonconforming and being autistic. So it likely influences our gender identity, potentially our sexual orientation, because it also impacts who we are friends with, who we like to hang out with, who we're attracted to. So being autistic, it's going to be interweaved. I feel it's very interwoven into every part of my being. And so with autism, sounds like there's me and I have my autism, and they are separate pieces. And I can't separate the two. So that's why I personally feel very specific on my language. The other thing is that I am very intentional with my language, because when we use language around autistic people that is very stigmatized, disorder, symptoms, things like that, we have this history of autistic people being painted as this big scary thing. And separating autism from the autistic person is something that has been done to do that in the past. And so that also can be really harmful, because then you see like people who are maybe peddling fake cures like MMS bleach and things like that for autistic kids, and they use that. Oh well, this is there's a normal kid in there. You just got to get the autism out, and that's not true. Yeah.
Right.
And so that's why there's a big push from a lot of autistic people to change that language, because it's very hard to kind of push that autism is something that you can separate, and there's a normal air quotes kid hiding under your autistic kid, because that it's I shouldn't say false hope, because you shouldn't, but it's like parents are scared and they're preying on that fear. Which, I went through all of those stages of grief with my own diagnosis. I don't know why parents wouldn't do the same thing. Just because it's a new piece of information, it's an adjustment, whenever we have to adjust our expectations in life, that can be traumatic, whatever we're adjusting our expectations to. Yeah, it's a difficult time.
Wow. I think it's funny. I always look at that certain like aspects of language as, if my name is Kevin and I don't like when people call me Kev, no one bats an eyelash. Like, oh, sorry, Kevin. But if someone's, autistic and they're like, no, I prefer this, or even with pronouns, even if we're venturing farther out of the topic, all of a sudden it's like a big to-do. Like, wait, what do you mean? I was told that I could call you autistic, or I could call you she, or I could call you whatever. And it's like, but I'm just saying, just call me that. It's very simple.
Well, yeah. What the person asks you. That's why I said, like, if someone says I'm a person with autism, if that's how they tell me they want me to refer to them, whether or not that's how I personally talk about autistic people in that one case, I'm going to refer to them how they want to be referred.
I'm very I also just want to say that was wildly interesting, because I didn't even think on that level of the language being an aspect to remove somebody from their diagnosis, and the manipulation that goes behind that. I do want to touch really quick on Alexa's question. She had said, what do you think about the upcoming conference, Understanding Autism Through the Actually Autistic Lens? Are you familiar with that? Are you going to be a part of that? Anything like that?
I can't click the link from here to see which one it is, because there are two, and I'm wondering if they can tell us which organization that is, because there's one that I am participating in, and I'm trying to think if that's the name of it. Hang on. Well, I don't know. That's going to derail everything when I figure it out.
No, you could find that out. I'll give a quick moment to say hi to Mom, who's watching. Hey, Mom.
Aww.
She always says hi, and I never get around to saying hi. So, hey,
Mom. Hi, Virginia.
Oh, that's funny.
I just don't want to.
Alexa saying this was organized by Educational Equity, Penn State University. This one that she's.
I'm not part of that one. Yeah, so I'm not a part of that one. I have seen it is going around, but it had a scheduling conflict. That's okay. Yeah, okay, gotcha. I was like, I need to know who the organizer is, because I know there's I'm in a few conferences, and I can't really remember all of them right now off my head. No, I've seen that one floating around. It looks like it would be interesting, but I had a conflict, so I didn't dig too deep into it, because I won't be able to attend, unfortunately.
Gotcha. You had touched earlier, speaking on, so to speak, removing the autism from your child or curing them. Can you give us a little bit of your personal opinion on the protocols that are in place for treating autism, so to speak?
Yeah, I think the problem comes a lot from that, like seeing autism as something that automatically, no matter what, is going to need you to act on it because they are autistic. For example, autistic relative that will not be named did speech and language therapy when they were young because they needed help with that. They didn't need help for being autistic, and I had tutoring because of my visual processing made it hard for me to do certain kinds of math when you could no longer, use your fingers and things. And so I needed tutoring for that part of being autistic. I need, accommodations for being autistic. But the problem with like a lot of the therapies right now is, one, the fear mongering. It starts with the fear mongering. where they scare parents and they say, hey, if you don't get this therapy right now, your autistic kid is never going to do this, that, and the other thing. And they're saying this to parents whose kids are as young as 2. You know, your kid's never going to talk. How are you going to tell someone that their 2-year-old kid's never going to talk?
Right.
You know,
Right.
I have a family member that didn't say their first word until they were 4. And they were, you know, and then the other thing is that you need this ABA to get your kids ready to go into school. It's like they sell it as like your autistic kids won't be able to mainstream school without this. And that family member of mine who, you know, didn't do ABA and did speech when they were 4, did move on and did great in school. I was the one that did terrible in school, you know, and neither one of us had ABA, I will say. So maybe I needed it. I'm joking. Maybe I needed it. I would have been smart now. But, you know, the thing about that is like the goal, you know, to get them into mainstream with this is you're still going to need accommodations when you get into mainstream education. That changes nothing. You know, I still would potentially need quiet workspaces. I still would need to get up and have movement breaks. I still would need accommodations in the classroom. So nothing would really be changing as far as that goes. So like the fears that they say, these are the things that that ABA will do for you to make sure, you know, these things. It's like, okay, well, we need to take that away because the selling points are wrong. Or it'll, you know, the other thing is originally when it was first started to peddle ABA, they were like, oh, it'll make your autistic child indistinguishable from their peers. I don't know if they say that anymore. Mm-hmm. I feel like they're trying to modernize and change their claims a little bit since that. But, you know, all of this has always been kind of with a goal to make autistic people seem less autistic or make us more palatable to neurotypical people around us. True. Yeah, which isn't really helpful. And see, all of this, I look at it from a little bit of a different lens than a lot of people because I, like, as I said earlier, I used to be a dog trainer. I used to be an animal trainer. And so I really loved behaviorism. I loved it. It was so great. It's like, oh, you give rewards and you give punishments. And the more you reward the behavior you get, the more you get it. And like with the dogs, and they do this with kids, like they find out, oh, what is the dog's interest? What does the dog love? Okay, well, you only give the dog that thing when they're doing what you want them to be doing. So with a kid, it's like, oh, this kid's really into this particular toy. Well, we're going to take this toy away from them and withhold it from them. And they only get it when they do this thing. And it teaches you that you can only have good things when you're doing what other people want you to be doing, whether or not that's what you actually want yourself. Because if you look at a dog, you're trying to get them to do, you're trying to get them to do something that's unnatural to them, you know. And with autistic children, they're trying to oftentimes get us to do things that are very unnatural to us. So, you know, it's a lot of the same methods that even sometimes, you know, considered too cruel to use on dogs are still being used on autistic children, like, you know, electroshock. Right. Still being used. Wow. JRC. You know, we're trying to get that ban, stop the shock, get people to stop doing it. Wow. But, you know, these things are still being used on autistic kids today. Things that for years have been agreed are not right for dogs, even, or for animals. It's like, okay, but still we see kids with disabilities being treated like they're less than people.
So I guess coming from that point, what would you even say to someone who has a child with a disability that feels like some sort of ABA therapy or something like that is the only option that they have? You know, we've agreed that society really is kind of not as inclusive as we want it to be. What will we say for a parent that that just feel like that's all they have?
Look into occupational therapy. If you're being told that's all you have, be careful. It's not occupational therapy that ABA is trying to move in on, because ABA is trying to move into speech. ABA is trying to move into all of these other things because it's big money. They got a lot of money to lobby and weasel their way into things. But there are other options out there. And, you know, sometimes, you know, these children are at crisis point from being misunderstood. And so that's really important to remember, that like the behaviors that, you know, behavior, air quotes, that you see your children having, like, for example, lashing out and maybe, you know, being aggressive to oneself or others. Like every time, like I have been aggressive to myself, it has been because I was in an extreme pain, emotional pain or physical pain, where hitting myself in the head or something feels like a better option. But I can communicate what's going on with you and tell you why.
Right.
You know, and I can explain this to you. Or, you know, when an autistic person has a meltdown, a lot of times it is because, well, when that happens, the flight or fight response is triggered. And so you feel like you're in really grave danger. And so if you know anything about flight response, you're gonna fight, you're gonna run the heck away, or you're gonna maybe freeze and shut or fawn or something. But usually autistic people, you're either gonna fight, which is what people see as those air quote violent meltdowns, because they feel cornered and trapped and they can't get away. I tend to run away and flee unless I'm trapped by an opposing force, someone holding me down, someone not letting me leave. I need to get away and recenter myself. And a lot of times other people being around when this is happening just makes things worse. So I've seen a lot of people, they're like, oh, you know, this autistic person is violent or whatever. But then, like, if you kind of look back at what the situation happened, it's like they kept probing at the person. They wouldn't just let them regulate and calm themselves down. They kept being like telling them to calm down, or they were trying to hold them still, or they wouldn't let them leave, or they were in their face, and they kept escalating things. And then you get to that point where you feel like you're not thinking clearly, and you just feel like you're in danger. You feel like you're in really bad danger, and you're not thinking clearly. And so, like, repressing this isn't helpful because you need to help that person feel safe.
Right. Wow.
You know?
I think that that leads that I just we at PCCS very much agree with this kind of ideals that we have, that, and it kind of feels like almost like as a parent, and to full disclosure to all viewers, I do not have a child with a disability, so I cannot speak on behalf of anyone that does. But it just seems to be, I know whenever there's anything that comes up at the doctor at my own child's visits, you know, there's always a sense of severity and a sense of like black and white, and a doctor knows more than you do. So they're going to tell you what to do, and you're like, well, here we go. And it really sounds more like it's actually identifying more with your child rather than what a doctor says this blanket thing will be able to do for you, you know? And it sounds like certain parts of those types of therapies are helpful for very specific reasons, but it's not a blanket statement to do ABA and you can't get this unless you do this, and then it's not helpful for all parties. And I think that, again, it just kind of ties back into the individualism and making sure, you know, you understand what will trigger that person. Are you familiar with the rapid prompting method for communication?
I am a bit, and I do want to say, because I kind of saw this question on here, that I don't want to go too much into it as someone who is not non-speaking. I do, you know, I didn't want to make you drop the question though, because I think it's important to be brought up that a lot of times it just does nothing about us without us, right? I'm not non-speaking, so you know, this is one of the things where we need to hear from non-speaking people a little bit more. You know, I hear there's controversy on it, but I have heard a lot of non-speakers advocating for this as well. And, you know, what my understanding is that because autistic people have different motor control issues, and a lot of those non-speakers are more impacted by the motor control, and that's why they aren't able to move their mouths, that this method does make it easier for people who have different motor control. That is my understanding. But you know, it's I'm not a non-speaker. You know, I'm not a non-speaker. So, you know, I don't want to jump into that one too deeply. But I would recommend like looking into different non-speakers to see what they have to say on the subject. Neuroclastic, I feel like, has done some articles on this in the past, if I'm not mistaken, off the top of my head. There is like a Facebook group, Ask Me, I am an ACC user, I think is what it's called, or something very similar. That's really good. Autistic people who are non-speaking have a lot to say on a lot of things, and that's I'll plug that right now, and say that we need to listen to them and amplify their voices a little bit more on some of these things.
I love that. Absolutely. Shifting a little bit over, we find a lot of times, and if you're comfortable speaking as an adult, we find a lot of times we struggle, and I've heard from other colleagues. Oh, I'm sorry, I'm jumping the gun here. We often find that people with disabilities, they are often like desexualized. We don't think of them as a person that could be in a relationship or married or even having children. What do you mean? What are your thoughts around sexual health and education for people with disabilities? Because realistically, that's not really often there or anywhere near a priority usually. What are your thoughts?
It's a big problem when we don't teach sexual education, boundaries, and consent to people with disabilities, especially the desire to have human sexuality and attraction is a spectrum. So, okay, I don't want to discount asexual people here, but it is a very natural desire to feel the longings to want to be in a relationship with another person. Some people don't have that, but it's something that a lot of people experience, right? And so there are asexual autistics and there are asexual neurotypicals, and there are sexual autistics who are hypersexual, and there are hypersexual neurotypicals, just like everybody else, right? And I've met actually a lot of autistic people and neurodivergent people in the kink community too. So autistic people and neurodivergent people are definitely having sex. That's where autistic babies come from. We think it's genetic. Science seems to be agreeing that there's genetic components, and so it's something that's passed down. So we know autistic people are having intercourse and making babies. So we know autistic people have sex. I've kind of joked and said, "Hey, do autistic people have sex?" on my profile before, and everyone's like, "Yeah, of course we do. Of course we do." But people think we don't. Yes, but people think we don't. And some of us might not. That's fine. But it's a really big problem if, like, I'm in Texas. Like, we have abstinence only education for sex ed here. It does not work. It does not work. We have really high teen pregnancy rates. I think some of the highest in the nation. And you know what else is going on in Texas right now? So this is just a S show. That just keeps getting worse. But that doesn't work. And so in Texas, all of the kids get no real sex education, really. None of us got good sex ed growing up. We were just showed terrifying pictures of STDs and told, "Don't do this or you'll die." Which was a whole other problems. But with people with disabilities, like more like they don't go to sex ed. They get nothing, and then we don't know what healthy relationships look like or any of that. And I think all kids need to be taught these things, like really boundaries, really consent, like so important. And just the importance of being comfortable with someone you're in a relationship with and knowing that they're safe before you give yourself to them in that way. It's a whole mess. But it's like people think autistic people, or just people with disabilities, sometimes are like perfect little innocent cherub things. It's like gross. No, we're people. When don't no ew.
Oh boy, yeah, no, that definitely makes sense. What are your thoughts on guardianship versus supported decision making? So I know I've worked in the field a lot, and I've been a residential manager, and you have to deal with guardians whose best interest may not be necessarily, they think they're doing well, let's say. What are your thoughts on that kind of dynamic and all that?
It worries me. It worries me so much. I mean, just look at, Britney Spears, like the very public big case that we can use as an example, right?
Awesome. Yeah.
And she has a platform so that she has people supporting her and is able to maybe potentially get out of this now that she's spoken up. Hopefully she'll get out of it. Knock on wood, we're hoping for Britney. But with people who have developmental disabilities and have, sometimes very little voice to be able to speak for themselves, because sometimes the people in control might not let them speak out for themselves. It can be a very potentially dangerous situation, because if you you have a great parent that really is looking out for you, yeah, maybe they can do some good for you. But sometimes people may not understand, and they may think what's good for you isn't what's good for you, even if that's not, what you want. Even good intentions, the road to heck is paved to good with good intentions. Not being able to have any autonomy over your own decisions, and that's horrible. That's really horrible. People can be kept like pets almost. Like someone shouldn't have so much power over another human being like that.
It feels almost like it would be like undermining their like humanity in a way, like that almost to a level of like ownership, especially if the person is expressing themselves that maybe they don't agree with. That it definitely like lessens their humanity in a way.
Yeah. And that's what we see over and over again, with people who have disabilities, that they're, like we said earlier, like shocking and things, treated like they are a lesser class of people, like a second tier class of people instead of fully autonomous human beings.
Yeah.
It's the same issue.
Yeah.
I was actually going to cut in, Kevin, if you don't
Hop
mind.
in, girl. Go on.
So, Lyric, I have to say, just sitting back here and listening to you speaking, you just exude confidence and self-awareness, and I just really could listen to you speak for hours. And I think that a huge thing from what I can kind of gather from that is that confidence kind of helps you with your advocacy efforts. And I'm just curious. We've had some struggles, and it's been a little bit of an uphill battle trying to find ways to get people that we support want to be involved in decision making and advocacy efforts. What advice could you give us to kind of navigate through that?
I'm not sure if I understand exactly the question. I'm sorry. It didn't draw me a picture. I'm a visual thinker, and for some, I don't know if you can maybe phrase the wording a little bit different.
Sure.
My brain just didn't.
No, that's fine. So we want to be able to ensure that the people that we're supporting feel confident in advocacy efforts.
Okay.
What are some ways that you think would be beneficial and helpful to get us there? What are some ways we can get the people we support to want to advocate?
Well, I don't know if you can get people to want to advocate, because you can't really control people's motivations for doing things. I got into this because I looked online, and what I saw frustrated me and made me sad and mad and gave me all of these feelings and emotions. And one thing, that is an important piece that probably would make this different with somebody else who gets mad and sad and then doesn't act, is I did feel like I had skills that I could use to throw at the problems. So that, might be a difference too. Also, the confidence I have right now has been something that has really just been doing this over the past 5 years since finding out I was autistic. So when I started getting into advocacy, my confidence was actually a lot lower, very much lower. Being more confident in myself and learning to be more authentic in myself has built the confidence. So really empowering people and letting them know it is safe for them to be themselves, and they don't have to be a manufactured version of themselves that, what everybody else thinks is an acceptable version. Like, they don't have to do that. That can be really helpful, is letting people know that it's okay for them to come show up as they are. That can be a helpful thing too. But I think people really have to want to do this. Otherwise, they're not going to do it, because it's the social media stuff is hard work on its own, even just moderating a Facebook page, because sometimes there's some really horrible people on Facebook and the internet, especially when you're openly queer and openly non-binary and all those things, in addition to being autistic. But then, that's just like a small piece, like the work in the outside world that I do in the different capacities, most of which I don't even talk about online. Like that's even more intense. sometimes, going and, working in state legislatures or talking to schools or, working in businesses and organizations, trying to help them fix their culture or their physical space problems. Like these things, it's like the stuff nobody even hears about is the gold, like the real work. And the social media is just something I've done to kind of do like giving back, I guess, like giving back, like giving the knowledge I have out, like a pay it forward kind of a thing, because I see that it's something that we really need. And it's like, oh, there's a need and I can do the thing.
I love that. That's awesome.
I love that. So what do you personally hope to accomplish with your advocacy efforts?
I would love to work myself out of a job. It would be so great to like not need to, like one day if I go start posting on social media stuff and everyone's like, everybody knows this already, why are you even talking about this anymore? That would be the best day of my life, because right now really the reality, and one reason I keep doing what I do in the education work on social media is, if an autistic person comes out and is like, hey, I'm autistic, someone's like, no, you're not, or, oh, you must be high functioning, or I don't believe you. Because people don't really understand what autism is. They understand a very narrow stereotype of what an autistic person is or what they think an autistic person is. A lot of times it's a neurotypical actor who's pretending to be autistic that they're thinking of as autistic, which if you're thinking of faking, like someone faking autistic is autistic, like what chance do us real autistics have, who don't look like that one representation? I'd like for people to understand that and understand the vastness in it too, because I am one autistic experience, which is very different from even my autistic partner, or a non-speaking autistic has a very different experience than I do as someone who has the word vomit doesn't stop. It's like very different experiences. We have similar experiences too, because like there are times where if I get anxious enough or overwhelmed, I become like a selective mutism, which is a terrible name because it's not selective. I have no choice, where like my mouth will just like, right. I can't make it move. And it's like, you see me today, blah, blah, blah. But then it's like, I know what I want to say and my mouth just won't do anything. I'm sitting there stuck inside myself going,
nothing selective about that.
No, not at all. But so there are some experiences that are similar, but I don't experience that all the time. Right. So it's to a much lesser degree. So like people to understand like how much of a spectrum it is, and that a spectrum is not a linear line. It is like more of a circular pie graph, kind of a gradient thing we've got going on. That would be a dream come true, is for people to really understand that we're people and see us as people and not stereotypes. The end goal, I guess. If I have to say an end goal, it was for autistic people to stop being looked at as stereotypes, which is kind of hard because the bigger my platform grows, it's like I worry I'm becoming a stereotype. Like people are going to think of me as a new stereotype. And I'm like, no. Like it's not just me. There's other autistic people.
Just me. That's it.
No. And I'm like that. So that, I'm trying to work more, like I always like share other autistic pages and other autistic advocates, especially autistic advocates who come from different backgrounds than I do, or have different experiences that maybe I don't have, because I think it's really important to show that there is that diversity in autism. So that's kind of my new focus, is trying to find more autistic people to continue to amplify, so that we can see that there are more voices now that my platform itself has grown so ridiculously large. To me, I feel it's like out of control. I can't believe it.
Love it. Love to see it. So alongside that, I guess this would also encompass what the goal is for your Neurodivergent Rebel platform and your social media. And it mentions in your bio also that you are a writer and speaker and artist. Can you tell us a little bit more about these other things that you do?
Yeah. So I've been a writer my whole life. I write better than I speak. My writing is a lot more streamlined and organized, whereas this is a bit all over the place. But I love writing. I've always loved writing. And so when for a while, I was working in a full-time inside another HR and business consulting firm. and I started to write and design training around organizational culture and neurodiversity. And I did a lot of this inside for another company that I used to work for. And we still have a lot of love for each other. We're still all friends, but COVID, we had to do a round of layoffs. And so it was the best thing that ever happened to me is being let go, because I started focusing on my business again, which is neurodivergent consulting, and started to work more to just work on the neurodiversity piece. Because, when I was in someone else's business, it's like other things in HR, and, it was more broad. And now I was like, well, you know what? I only want to focus on teaching people about autism and neurodiversity. And so that's kind of that other piece is like, I'm a writer, I'm also an actor, but those skills on their own aren't career paths that'll make sure I don't starve, because the social media isn't, what puts the food in the ice chest. It's the work I do. Yep. So like I will write up educational content. I weave in narratives and stories. I make jokes, and I make it fun. I make it entertaining. I make it educational, and I teach people about autism and neurodiversity from a very human-centered perspective, instead of this very medical, observing from an outsider's point of view, magnifying glass, outside looking in perspective that a lot of people are really used to. And so, that's kind of me when I'm outside of social media, is like I'm usually like writing and practicing and rehearsing and preparing trainings, because that's the larger version of like what I do for free for our community. But like the long format, like an hour or 2 hours, long, more in depth than what we get with on social media.
I love that. Awesome.
Thanks.
Because it's getting almost that time. If there's just a single takeaway that somebody could take out of this, what would you want the one single thing that somebody remembers from this to be?
If I could only pick one, I would say that whether you are neurodivergent or autistic or not, if you're wanting to learn about autism, look, or any neurodivergencies like ADHD, whatever, look for those voices and read a bunch of different perspectives. Some you may agree with, some you may not agree with, that's fine. But read what people are saying, like the human experiences. Because I almost didn't after I found out, I read that book by the autistic person, I didn't go get an assessment right away, because I then went and looked up autism and looked up the DSM and went, nah, because it's written in such a pathological way. Like, for example, obsessive interest, blah, 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 blah. Right. It sounds really bad. Like, that's a bad thing. And so I don't see myself that way, but I do have obsessive interests, but it's not a bad thing. It's sometimes it's a terrible thing. It can be horrible and it can be good, but it's like neither good nor bad. It's just a simple fact about myself. But right. The language in the medical books is often very dehumanizing. So if you can locate voices of people talking about their own experience, that is what was so valuable to me. And I think that's what a lot of people say helps them as well. So that would be the golden nugget, I guess.
I know it's hard to boil down a whole hour's worth into a little tiny sentence, but I think that's really great. And I think, honestly, in general, we could always use more education on other people's experience as a whole. Honestly, I think we could learn so much from each other and everybody, and personal experiences, and really get a better understanding. You had mentioned, you might not agree with it, and you might agree with it. I think people are very scared of not agreeing with something, like, oh, I can't read, I don't want to hear this person's opinion because I don't agree. You could disagree, or you could, put yourself in the position to learn more, So that's really important. Alexa would love to have you speak at a class that she teaches for social workers. That's lovely.
All right. Well, I guess, I don't know if when you give up the links, I typed in, you can get the link to my website that has a contact form. Alexa, that would be great. I'd love to talk to you.
Let's talk about that. Where would anybody find you now that we know you?
Yeah, well, I'm pretty easy to locate. 2 websites, neurodivergentrebel.com. That's the blog that started all of this chaos. And also, I'm Neurodivergent Rebel on Facebook. If you want to hop over there and find me, YouTube. I'm also on YouTube as Neurodivergent Rebel, and the consulting and the writing and all of that. That, like I said, is how I support myself as a human. Is neurodivergentconsulting.org. And if I can help you create training for your organization, let me know. I'd love to talk to you about that.
Love that. Wow, there's just I mean, honestly, we could have you on for another hour that we didn't even touch on so many other aspects that we wanted to talk about.
We'll have to do it again.
Yes, we'd love to have
please.
you here again. Absolutely. For everybody who's watching, definitely add them on Facebook. Check out what they're about, all their work. It's great, interesting. I'm a subscriber.
Thank you.
You know, and take it away, Alyssa.
Well, Lyric, I want to thank you so much for taking the time with us today. And we really put so much into 1 hour. So you need to come back. We need to get in touch again because we need to have a part 2. So we will be in touch. But I want to thank you so much for taking the time out of your day. And it's really been an honor to speak with you and learn a lot. I'm going to be honest, I've been taking in what you're saying, and I feel like I'm learning a lot. So I want to thank you for giving us that opportunity to talk today. And with that said, I want to thank our viewers as well for watching and tuning in, and stay tuned for the next time Lyric comes back, and have a great rest of your day.
Thank you, everyone.
Bye.